Management Analysis and Problem Solving, HIC, Client Presentation.
G'day and welcome to the client briefing paper for health insurance company known as HIC for short. HIC are an Australian local insurance cover company providing insurance cover for travel, life insurance and pets. HIC historically have shown substantial group net profits in excess of $430 million annually, and that figure was reported for the year 2017. HIC are listed on the Australian Securities Exchange and employ nearly 2,500 staff and have a gender balance close to a 50-50 split. The company, in addition, is committed to diversity in employment. HIC's senior management has a greater than 40% mix held by women. In mid-2016, 5.5 million Australians were covered by private health insurance. However, the local market is showing signs of a decline. The insurance market is competitively tight, with 33 private health insurers operating in this space, and the top 5 insurers taking out 81% of the market. HIC themselves have been around for 50 years, so are a well-experienced and a stable company. The current market share is sitting at 25%. In 2016, the total overseas worker and visitor insurance market was worth $350 million and is seeing premium growth of around 7% annually. The market has two distinct segments locally: mandatory cover requirements, for example, international students studying in Australia, where insurance cover must be taken out before arrival, and then the non-mandatory segment for holiday visitors or long-stay business workers. Overall, the insurance industry is experiencing gross margins sitting at 14%, with benefit growth at around about 5%. HIC have seen sales of 75% per annum in the visitor worker insurance segment. However, HIC is experiencing a steady decline in market share due to increased competition in the marketplace. Obviously, HIC needs to see the situation turn around and are keen to increase market share. HIC have advised they have a strong desire to focus new strategies on the international student, international visa worker, for example 457, and holiday visitor market to become the preferred supplier of health insurance to this segment. The visitor market alone accounts for 4.8 million potential customers annually, and the HIC target market of overseas visitors and workers has been growing at 7 to 8% per annum. The industry is locally regulated by the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority and defines the mandatory and non-mandatory requirements laid out to HIC and other local insurance providers in this segment. HIC are interested in exploring what potential new features may be offered to any new or current customer. This may include new delivery features. Health Insurance Co. are interested in engaging and capturing these potential new customers and ensuring the user experience is a good and smooth one. In addition, HIC would like to become more visible and noticeable to potential customers and partners, especially within the customer overseas market. As this market is based within a different cultural background setting overseas, there are challenges connecting and engaging with this preferred market segment. HIC are well placed to take advantage of this opportunity with a few changes as we outline via the following. Handing over to you now, Phoebe.
Now that we've identified the issues and separated them into two different clusters, we can further break down these issues into what are known as hard and soft issues. The harder issues are those which are generally readily apparent and involve fixes to physical items such as systems, structures, and policies. The softer issues are generally the underlying issues and can be linked with the intangible, such as business culture, employee engagement, and so forth. The softer issues are equally important to identify and treat, as it's the softer issues which are linked to the harder issues, and we won't be able to resolve hard issues without first resolving the softer issues linked to the business. Some of the harder issues are fairly easy to resolve, such as the poor online systems and a lack of marketing overseas, which can be fixed through directed policies and capital expenditure, whereas the softer issues linked to communication as well as the inability to differentiate from other competitors will be linked to company values. With the harder and softer issues identified, we also need to work through and identify the stakeholders that will be affected by HIC's change. These stakeholders must be considered and consulted as part of change management, as allowing these affected stakeholders, where able, to participate will create sustainable change in the future, whilst also allowing HIC to start dealing with some of the softer issues and resulting towards cultural change. Some of the stakeholders for HIC are the employees across all functions and all managerial levels, regardless of gender or ethnicity. Their current and prospective customers need to be included. Business partners, such as those that we procure with readily. Those setting market conditions, such as government agencies, as well as finance partners, such as banks and other insurance groups who we work with. With stakeholders now understood, we can work towards the gap statement, which identifies the internal issues, as well as the desired future state for the business, and then using the hard, soft issues identified, the stakeholders considered, to identify the gap statement of how we're going to bridge our current state to HIC's future state. The gap statement in front of you is in the client brief. Moving through some of the key aspects though, within the internal issues gap statement, what we're looking at doing to resolve the current state and move to an improvement for HIC is to work towards a restructure, which will see personnel possibly working towards more direct functions, such as in sales and marketing, versus those that they may currently be in, such as procurement, which no longer adds the value it may have done over the past 50 years. We'll look to align resources to these direct functions. We'll seek to develop and monitor key performance indicators within the organisation to ensure that the singular clear strategy which is developed is worked towards by all employees and managers. Finally, we'll ensure that there's a best price policy as well as loyalty rewards for customers both current and future to ensure there's retention and growth. Some of the external issues which will need to be managed are the partnering with domestic and international agencies, bundling products for customers, doing these things to ensure that HIC is recognised as the first paramount health insurance provider within Australia for customers entering the country and also already within the country.
Thanks, Brendan. Now, my part here is to explain the options which can be explored to address the gap statement explained by Brendan previously. We have come up with two options to close each gaps. Now, starting with the first cluster, which is internal issues, the gap can be closed through restructuring or new ERP system. Second clusters, which is related to external issues, can be addressed through partnering with other providers and agencies or going through mergers and acquisitions. Now let's go into the details of the first clusters of the issues. By restructuring, it will allow HIC to position itself for growth and expansions. It will also allow the use of KPI to realign people for the critical part of the business, such as sales and marketing. However, it will need an expert that have experience to help make this works. It will also need support from the board. There's also risks that come with these options, which is employee insecurity, which might have influence on their morale and performances, and also the new government regulations that obviously out of our control. By investing in a new ERP system, HIC can increase the access to the potential customer base, have a better insight to the market through the information exchange between partners, also the ability to offer more and better service to the customers. The limitation on these options will be the funding, and the risk will be employee that resisting to change, which might become less productive because they might not even use the system at all. Now we will take you through the options available for the second classes of the issue, which is come from the outside of your organizations. Firstly is by partnership with the other provider and agencies. This will increase your access to the potential customer base, provide a better insight to the market through the information exchange between partners, and ability to offer more and better service to the customers. However, it will be limited by disagreement on the business vision or no business that will be interested with the partnership. Hopefully that will not be the case. And the risk will be disagreement among partners and the conflict of interest as
So firstly, I wanted to say thank you, Ken, for a great explanation of the options to close each cluster and why they were identified post putting together that gap statement. My name is Paul Kreutzer, and what I'm going to be doing now is taking you through our preferred option for HIC, so they can close that identified gap of that lower than desired profitability and market share, and really achieve that desired future state of greater profitability and further market share. So why did we choose that? We're going to focus on doing that in looking at internal versus external issues within the business. So Ken did a great job in putting those together for us, and we'll focus a little bit deeper into that and have some analysis to why we chose those. Focusing on the strengths of each one rather than the limitations and risks. I know they're important to talk about, and we will go over those, but I believe within the internal strengths, it was fairly clear that we were able to focus on those strengths more so than the weaknesses or the limitations and risks involved. And then finally, we'll put together an action plan that we can measure using the SMART acronym, and then move into our desired result and whether that's going to work moving forward. So firstly, we'll take you through the analysis in the internal versus external options to close each cluster out. And then why we came up with the internal option of investing back into the business and a new enterprise resource and planning system to allow that to work. So firstly, I'll focus on the external factors first, because I think we'll take them away fairly quickly. So external issues within the business, the viewpoint behind that we had is that they're much harder to manage. So if we make external changes, whether that's a merger, an acquisition of other businesses, great idea in theory, and that we will immediately gain new market share. But there is a lot of infighting that comes through with the business. And if we look back into earlier assignments we've done, in particular employee engagement is something that's really hard to focus on during a merger or an acquisition. There's a lot of dissatisfaction within a business, and it's hard to manage the expectations of the employees there. So you often don't get the productivity that you want. And with HIC wanting to drive productivity and market share, it's not ideal for where they're at this point in time. Partnering with other agencies and providers is a great idea, but then there's that disagreements among partners, conflicts of interest, and disagreements really on the business's vision. So where do they want to go? And that's what we're trying to define here, is where we want to go in the future and how we can close that gap. So if there's any kind of disagreement in that, then that's an instant red flag. If you're looking internally within the business, great idea to restructure and look at how we can streamline some of our services. However, restructuring creates a lot of uncertainty, particularly around employees. And if we're trying to drive productivity and get to that desired future state of better productivity and market share, then any kind of uncertainty within the business is difficult to manage. So that leaves us with investment. Investment, I think, is a great idea in HIC's instant or want in this point in time. So they're wanting to invest into that new enterprise resource and planning system and refocus on their delivery of services. What that's going to enable us to do is to really highlight the customer experience. So we're not going to be bleeding any further market share. We will get some maybe percentage increase from word of mouth advertising and activities around that, but it's going to allow us to give back a better price point to our customers. So they're going to be happier and less likely to shop around. And we've identified that earlier in the assignment, where we do have a market in which our customers are looking elsewhere for a better provider, and it's mainly based on a price point. So if we can make that service better with a better price point, then we're looking already in a much stronger position. So the cons associated with that option, they're not as high. It's employee a bit of change resistance, but that can be managed fairly easily. Funding is probably the biggest red flag there, but I believe that funding can be put together, because if we are investing in new systems, we could be putting that funding back into paying for them as well. So we'll move now on. Now this brings us to our action plan or our action steps, and I believe it's really important that we put together SMART goals to make this achievable. So we've identified that it needs to be a measurable action plan is key to the success of our preferred option, and we want to look at that with specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-based goals. So the first thing is to emphasize the customer experience. It's a very important first step in retaining market share. It's a very specific goal, so we want to retain market share. And that can be measured by customer satisfaction surveys and close attention to retention rate of customers. And there's next to no cost involved with that. So if we focus back on our customers and make sure that we're really looking after them, they're less likely to shop around and leave. The second part there is investment into marketing and key business functions, which will allow for some further market penetration and consistency of messaging within the competitive landscape that we operate in. So the action step aligns really well that it's very specific. So we're investing back into the marketing and key business functions that allow for further market penetration. So we measure it by looking at how much further market share we're getting, and it's achievable as well. And we know that we can certainly achieve that. It's realistic, and then we can put some time values on it. So let's say that we look at that within a quarterly point. So how much are we growing on a quarterly basis? So that brings us to our conclusion, and essentially, did we get the desired result that we wanted? Well, we're yet to find that out, but we believe that HIC are in a fortunate position. They do have 25% market share, so they've definitely got room to grow. The other side to that is we look at it and say that, the other bit around that is they've got 25% market share and 50 years of tenure. However, there's a number of issues at present preventing the desired future state to be reached, and we've gone through those. But the top 10 challenges, they focus on profitability and market share, and through refocusing on customer service and being customer service focused, we're going to keep our market share. And to increase it, we're going to reinvest in the business in those profit building activities. So looking at further pushing into the marketplace. So it really is recommended that a focus in investing within the business and controlling those elements which are controllable from an internal perspective will allow HIC to close the gap and increase their market share whilst retaining profitability.